Bred in circuses. This phrase is now known to everyone. The Roman satirist Juvenal characterized with these words the basic aspirations of his countrymen, and he was so accurate in this that the phrase became an ancient Roman meme and has come down to this day. The ancient Romans did indeed know a great deal about spectacle, and just like today's viewers, they loved action movies, horror movies, comedies, dramas, sports, and military parades. Only they had it all arranged a little differently, and referred to by the common word games. At first, most of them were religious ceremonies of one sort or another, dedicated to the gods and religious festivals. But as time went on, they became more and more common entertainment. The climate favorable to farming, the advanced tax system, the spoils of war and tribute from the provinces filled the Roman coffers, and the moneybags of the ruling nobility. As a result, the Romans could afford many interesting things, so to speak, at the expense of the budget. In order to distract the population from social or political discontent, those in power practiced free distribution of bread, oil, and wine, and, of course, a variety of spectacles. So, what did the ancient Roman television show citizens in order to make them think less about social problems? Gladiatorial Games. Even the Etruscans, who were one of the ancestors of the ancient Romans, had a funerary rite. Men armed with swords fought to the death over a fresh grave, destined to be sacrificed to the gods. The Romans inherited this tradition, developed it, deepened, and expanded it. Thousands of warriors, convicts, and slaves, free professional fighters, condemned to death criminals, dangerous animals, and even, since a certain historical moment, women took part in gladiatorial games of ancient Rome. Not only that, fighting gladiators was not shameful for noble citizens and even Roman emperors. However, they did it only at their own will. The gladiatorial arenas hosted deadly duels and battles, staged famous or mythical battles, fights with beasts, and other cruel performances. The audience often participated in deciding the fate of the defeated by voting on whether to kill the fallen or let them live. This, of course, created a powerful sense of ownership of the event and was intoxicating in its own way. Nobility. Translated from ancient Greek, it means sea battles. However, they took place not on the sea, but in artificial reservoirs specially created for the dramatization of sea battles. Gladiators, as well as prisoners of war and those condemned to execution, took part in the nobility. Tribunes were erected along the banks, and the famous and celebrated sea battles were reproduced on the water. It was all grown up, real ships, real weapons, and real death. The decks were cracking, the ships were burning and sinking. People were dying by the thousands, as in a real war, and the audience was enthralled. Beast Hunt. This entertainment included a wide variety of animal shows, from the innocent, such as the usual display of strange foreign animals, training miracles and tricks, to bloody hunts and duels. Bears, tigers, lions, bulls, and panthers were pitted against each other and pitted against people. Thousands of people and animals killed each other. The shows included professional animal trainers and bestiary tamers, as well as ordinary gladiators, and in the good old Roman tradition, criminals condemned to death. For example, before Rome abandoned paganism, it was very popular to publicly feed some Christians to hungry lions. The victims might be given weapons, and then the execution would be longer and more interesting. The performances with animals were often erotic in nature. Mythological plots, which the Romans were very fond of, often contained episodes of human intercourse with animals, including sexual violence. Such scenes were also played out in the arena in front of all the honest people. But not all spectacles in ancient Rome were of such a cruel and unbridled nature. Among the more cultural activities is theater, for example. The Roman theater inherited the traditions of the ancient Greek theater, but in many ways it lost the serious Enlightenment character and pathos that the Greek theater had. Besides tragedies and comedies, the Roman theater had many simpler and lower genres, and the profession of acting was not as respected. Most often the actors were slaves or freedmen. Among the genres of the Roman stage one could find sums, performances of magicians and acrobats, mimes, small farces with pokes and slaps, pantomimes, dancing performances without words, atellans, short and sometimes crude farces, comic scenes of everyday life, satirist, which included both words and singing and dancing with music, mocking and sarcastic songs. Fezzinines, poetic games were also practiced in the Roman theater. Attendance at the theater was free for free Romans. Slaves were not allowed in theaters. Sporting games. You have probably already noticed that a variety of competitions the Romans were very fond of, in ancient Rome regularly held one or another sports games, which practiced the competition of athletes, fencing, wrestling, running, jumping, fistfights. The Capitoline Games, dedicated to Jupiter, were a Roman copy of the ancient Greek Olympic Games and included both athletic competitions and, in later stages, competitions of singers and musicians. From ancient initiation rites grew the Trojan Games, the equestrian performances of young men from noble families. Chariot races took place on special hippodromes and were particularly beloved by the public. Fans rooting for different teams could cause riots if they were not happy with the results. The winners of the races received wealth and popularity. Triumph. This special solemn ceremony was awarded as a reward if the victory was overwhelming and a great number of enemies were killed. The whole of Rome came out to greet the victorious general returning from the war. It was a grandiose show. The triumphator entered the city on a gilded chariot, sumptuously dressed, surrounded by his family. A special slave held a laurel wreath above his head and whispered in his ear at the same time, "Remember death," so that he would not become too conceited. Behind him rode commanders and comrades in arms, then compatriots freed from enemy captivity, and after, soldiers in full parade, at the top of their lungs singing both praise and mockery for the triumphant. But the most interesting part of the procession was the captured booty, weapons, gold and silver, statues and paintings, precious utensils, cloth and other treasures, painted sacrificial cattle. Here the noble prisoners, kings and commanders with their families and cronies. At times there were so many trophies that their entry into the city dragged on for 2 or 3 days. The procession was accompanied by artists, mimes, magicians, acrobats, and jugglers entertained the crowd as much as they could. It is interesting that all these entertainments in ancient Rome were not show business. Their attendance was free of charge. Moreover, the organizers of games and performances were obliged to provide the spectators with festive refreshments and drinks at their own expense. Bread and circuses. What the citizens of ancient Rome traded for these things is now hard to say.